Hi, my name is Nazef Syed. I'm a senior here at UNC, and today my speech, my TED Talk, is going to be on colonization in the modern world. So, a few days ago, last week, you guys heard the great news that a war criminal died at the age of 100. His name is Henry Kissinger. I don't know if you guys know him. We might have been mentioning him in class a while back, but yeah. Henry Kissinger died last week, and his news brought, like, a lot of Western leaders were, sending out condolences for his death. Biden, Macron, and even Putin, calling him a great American statesman and also a harbinger of peace. In fact, he also won the Nobel Peace Prize in the 70s. So, but then a lot of from the global south, there was a lot of joy and celebration with the death of Henry Kissinger. Especially, there was a Twitter account that was set up a few years ago that the title of the Twitter account was, "Is Henry Kissinger Dead?" And it basically counted every day, making not yet, not yet, not yet. And finally, when he died, it said, "He is finally dead." So Henry Kissinger was basically a warlord. Like, if he was in some other country, he'd be called a warlord, but since he was in America, he's called a statesman. He is responsible for the genocide that happened from where I'm from, Bangladesh. He supplied the Pakistani military, which was colonizing us then, with weapons, which is illegal under US law. He supplied them with weapons which caused the genocide of 3 million people, where I'm from. In South America and Chile, he caused the disposition of Santiago Allende and caused Pinochet to come in power. He was behind Pinochet in coming in power. He was a ruthless dictator who resulted in the deaths of many people and anyone who he suspected of being left-leaning or left-minded, not even communist. On top of that, perhaps what he's most famous for is extending the Vietnam War and bringing Cambodia and Laos into the war, and as a result, causing millions of people to die in Cambodia. And later, when the Khmer regime came into power, set by the events which were done by Kissinger, the Khmer regime killed even more people in Cambodia. But surprisingly, a lot of people from the global south, when Kissinger died, a lot of people from the global south were actually praising, also sending condolences. That's kind of dumb. You're like, he's done so much, bad things in the global south. Why are these people from the global south praising Kissinger? Well, there's one answer for this: colonialism. So colonialism, the definition of it goes, it's a policy enacted by countries to invade and subjugate a local population in order to bring economic benefits for themselves. Well, invasion, you might go like invasions and everything have been happening since the beginning of history. The Romans, famous invaders, the Greeks, so many people were famous invaders. But the scale at which the European powers carried out colonialism from the 15th to 20th century is unprecedented with anything that's happened in history before. Let's take an example. First example of mine would be here in America. When the Europeans came, especially the Spanish in Central America and in South America, they decimated local populations, be it the Incas, the Mayans, the Aztecs, and even through biological warfare, by spreading the plague within them, by using their superior weapons, and just completely decimating these populations. Let's go to Africa, especially in Congo, where King Leopold decided Congo will be his personal playground, where he's gonna do psychotic things, just murdering people, murdering people for fun, and then setting up mines where the profits will go to him, not the country itself. And also, if the workers didn't work properly in the mines or anything, their hands and legs would be chopped off. Let's go further to the beginning of the 20th century. In the 20th century, people don't talk about this. There was a genocide in Namibia carried out by the Germans, whereas for the first time, Germans actually tried out concentration camps. And these concentration camps were the precursor of what the Germans used later in the Holocaust during World War II. Now let's also go to the World War II. So Bengal, a region that's both in Bangladesh and in India, was a huge was a big farmland, and the British, basically, all the crops that were grown in this area was grown here and sent to the British army that was fighting the war, resulting in the local population not having food and dying of starvation, resulting in one of the world's worst man-made famines in the world, and it resulted in more than 5 million deaths. So these actions happened, these acts of colonial violence happened years ago. So what effect does it have today? Well, according to researchers from Brown and many other researchers from across South Asia, South Asians are most likely to get heart disease and diabetes due to them experiencing multiple famines in the last 100, 200 years. In Congo, even today, the mines that were originally set up 100, 200 years ago, the owners, the descendants, and those mines are still open today, and child labor and slave labor is used to mine for cobalt, lithium, which is being used by multinationals in our phones, our laptops, even vapes. So, and on top of that, let's look further into the former Francophone countries and the former French colonies in Africa. So, these French countries, such as Senegal, former French colonies such as Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire, Mali, Chad, they're some of the most one of the most natural resource-rich areas in the world. But France, the former colonial power, still has the right of refusal of all these resources, and they get to buy it at a lower price than market price. What's worse is that their currencies in these 15 former French colonies is still pegged to the franc. The franc doesn't exist anymore. France doesn't use the franc anymore. France uses the euro. So all the monetary policy of these former French colonies is still controlled by the French treasury. Is colonialism still really gone? And now another example, let's look at something that stopped 30 years ago, even less, 25 years ago in Canada. That's when the last boarding schools for indigenous populations closed in Canada. And we all know what happened when they found the mass graveyards in the indigenous schools last year. Thousands of children from indigenous families were taken into these boarding schools to be re-educated, to live in the white way of living, to become Christians, forgoing their culture, their ancestors, their language, and their religion. Perhaps the worst effect that colonialism has is that effect of self-hatred and the feeling of inferiority that it's brought into its former colonial subjects. Colonial powers proved their superiority and exerted their power on officials, on their subjects, by showing that how their features, their skin color, their way of living, and their color was better than what was local to them. That's why to get better in that society, to gain better standing in your own society, you have to know how to speak English or French, and you'd have to get a Western standard of education. The sad thing is this way of thinking still exists today, even in colonial countries today. In South Asia, where it's like very hot, very humid, the formal wear you wear everywhere is still a three-piece suit. For my graduation, in Bangladesh, I had to wear a three-piece suit in 110-degree weather, and it was humid. If I wore my cultural clothing, I'd be called informal, or it being not up to class or up to standard. Our judges back home, they still wear the weird wigs you see British people wear. Why the hell are judges in these brown countries wearing those wigs and passing out British law? Now another thing that's famous across many countries, across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, are whitening creams. These creams demelanate your skin and are known to cause skin cancer, but there's ads for them everywhere which show someone with fairer skin to be the epitome of beauty and someone with darker skin to be ugly, and them using the cream to become to that higher level. On top of that, beauty, the colonist idea of beauty, the idea of beauty that exists in the world also has been present from the colonialist time. Our beauty standards, such as having sharp cheekbones, a smaller nose, and many other features, result in the colonial standard of beauty. And unsurprisingly, science came up with a surprising standard of beauty that everyone should follow, saying there's a scientific measure of beauty, and if you're to that level, you're beautiful. And unsurprisingly, that measure of beauty is exactly the Western idealistic beauty stance, and not even the normal Western beauty stance. What aristocrats or the higher class during the colonial times thought was the ideal beauty stance. That's why we have this idea even today that peasants were considered to be shorter, uglier, stouter people, because even their beauty standards was based just on the upper class of in the Western colonial societies of those times. And the effects of that is still seen today. Plastic surgery is rampant in the Middle East, in Asia, and they're doing plastic surgery, putting their health under risk, lives under risk, to get more Western features, to feel more beautiful, by changing their features into looking more Western. Now, this self-hatred and the feeling of inferiority can have bigger consequences as well. Recently in Netherlands, in the Dutch elections, a leader called Geert Wilders, I'm sorry if I'm butchering the name, won the elections. He's half Indonesian. His mother was born in Indonesia and is of Indonesian ancestry. But this guy was banned from the UK and the US for being a racist, and is as far right as you can think. Not like far right than many of the leaders we think are very far right in America as well. Because the rhetoric he passes is outright racist, and I won't be repeating it in this room. And let's look at the UK. Suella Braverman, who the former foreign secretary, very famous, very powerful, she just got fired. She just got sacked. So Suella is from Mauritius, and her parents are descended from indentured servants from India. Keep in mind, indentured servants were bought forcefully to Mauritius by the British Empire. She says the British Empire was a force of good, and colonialism did more good to the world than bad. She has also said homeless people should be wiped out from the streets, and it'd be her dream to see asylum seekers be shipped to Rwanda. Now, this self-hatred isn't unsurprising. From generations of being imposed that one culture, a foreign culture, is better than yours, has caused this self-hatred to become so strong within these immigrants who believe that their rhetoric, if they show more self-hatred rhetoric, they'll be more accepted within Western society. So a lot of the actions I've said exist. The colonial violence happened before, and some of the effects are seen today. And colonialism ended a while ago, officially, but the world order that's been set up by these imperialistic, the imperial world, is still present today. And from what Kissinger did in the 1970s to what's happening in Congo today with people being exploited, it still hasn't gone away today. Thank you. If you guys have questions.
Why did you decide that you wanted to choose this topic for your speech?
I feel like, obviously, I think something we touched briefly on class, and also, I mean, this sounds very cliche as well, Kissinger dying and everything, reading a lot about it made me think about it as well. And also, it's a topic I think, like, personally, I feel like I've taken quite a few history classes here, and it's also, like, opened my eyes and everything, because I feel like all the stuff I said, I didn't know about even last year. But I've taken a history class, like, I'm a history minor, so I've taken a class this semester on like modern history topics on colonialism, on the Cold War and everything, which has really opened my eyes to look at everything from all different angles.
Mm-hmm. Besides like stopping all colonialism for good, what do you think are the most important steps to make like currently colonized countries and then like recently colonized countries, like get them to stable positions?
Good question. Obviously, that's a very good, like, it's a tough,
I'm just asking you to fix colonialism.
Obviously it's a tough process because it's a system that's been laid out there, and like the remnants of it still exist today. I feel like as time goes on, as like more like, you know, modern, like the modern generation, the newer generations become more aware of stuff, like our generation, be it more on the both sides, like if they're Democrats or Republicans, are still more aware than their older generations would be. I feel like as people become more aware of like what has happened, and take accountability, we can work towards like a better world. Anyone else?
That actually answered my question. That was perfect.
I think